at the challenges of why when youths are not involved in governance, the achievement of involving youths in governance, and the path forward in which governments can involve youths in leadership, both in Kenya and globally. Basically, youth participation in governance is a fundamental element of democracy and sustainable development globally. Young people constitute a significant portion of the population. About 16% of the population are adolescent and youth, as per the UNICEF in 2021. And their active engagement in a political and civic process is crucial for building inclusive societies. In many countries, however, youths are marginalized, their voices unheard, and their potential underutilized. This exclusion often leads to social unrest, unaddressed youth-specific issues, and missed opportunities for the innovation. In Kenya, youth constitute 75% of the population. As per the Kenya National Bureau of Statistics of 2019, yet their participation in governance remains limited due to structural and sociocultural barriers. Globally, initiatives such as the United Nations Youth Strategy emphasize the importance of engaging young people as active agents of change. This, therefore, explores a vital role of youth governance. And the role of youth participation in governance include, among others, one, enhancing democratic process. Young people are essential to the vibrancy of democratic systems. Their participation ensures that governance reflects the diversity of society. According to the International Institute of Democracy and Electoral Assistance, IDEA of 2017, youth involvement increases electoral legitimacy and accountability. Youth-led initiatives can include voting, civic education, participation in local councils, and activism. Example, in 2017, Kenyan general election, youth-led voter education campaign significantly increased youth voter turnout, which rose to 10% compared to previous elections in Kenya. This demonstrates how engagement directly impacts democratic process. And another factor is the social and economic development. Youth participation influences policy related to education, employment, health, and social justice. Young entrepreneurs can drive economic growth. For example, youth-led startups in Kenya, technology sector have created thousands of jobs by the Kenya Youth Employment Policy of 2018. Another example is the M-Pesa mobile money platform, pioneered by young entrepreneurs, revolutionized financial services in Kenya beyond facilitating economic inclusion for millions, as per the World Bank of 2012. Also, in promoting peace and stability, engaged youth are less susceptible to radicalization. The United Nations Development Program, UNDP, reports that involving youth peace building reduces violence and conflict. In Kenya, youth participation in peace dialogues after the 2007 and 2008 post-election violence helped in restoring the social cohesion. Another factor is building leadership and civic skills. Participation nurtures future leaders. Youth leadership programs such as the Kenya Youth Parliament equip young people with skills in governance, advocacy, and public speaking in Kenya. The challenges that youths are faced when are ignored. This is where, when youths are not involved in governance, there are issues that may crop up. Among them, we have the marginalization and disempowerment. Many government systems exclude youth through legal barriers, such as age restrictions and cultural norms that view the young people as inexperienced. This leads to disillusionment. The Global Youth Development Index of 2016 ranks Kenya as 42nd, citing limited youth engagement as a key issue. Another factor is political disenfranchisement. In many countries, youth lack representation due to the electoral laws and lack of platforms. For example, in Nigeria, youths under 30 constitute over 60% of the population, but hold less than 1% of the elected positions. We also have as a factor socioeconomic barriers. Poverty and lack of access to education hinder participation. According to UNESCO 2019, in sub-Saharan Africa, 34% of youth are out of school, limiting their civic engagement capacity. Then we have the cultural and institutional barriers. In some societies, traditional norms restrict young women or marginalized groups from leadership roles. For example, in some Kenyan communities, cultural practices discourage women from participating in politics. Consequences of ignoring the youths. We have increased protest and social unrest. In 2019, Youth for Change protests in Kenya were driven by youth frustrations over unemployment, policies that overlook youth needs, e.g., we have inadequate youth employment programs, loss of opportunities for innovation. Youth-led startups often the most dynamic sectors. Then we have the achievements of youth involvement in governance. What we can benefit if we involve the youths. Among others, we have youth-led movements and advocacy. In 2011, Arab Spring saw youth-led protest toppled authoritarian regimes. In Kenya, the Sauti ya Wanyonge movement mobilized young men advocate against gender-based violence. Then we have legal and institutional reforms. Kenya 2010 constitution, like this one here, introduced 30% youth quota in parliament and county assemblies, a groundbreaking reform aimed at increasing youth representation. Kenya National Assembly 2010. Similarly, Rwanda Youth Council have become vital platforms for youth voices in policy making, as per the Rwanda Ministry of Youth in 2019. Another factor is increased civil engagement, which is also an achievement. Youth voter turnout increased in several countries. For example, in the European Union reports that youth voter turnout increased by 5% after targeted civic engagement programs, the EU report of 2019. Then we have influence on policy. Youth involvement in climatic activism led to the adoption of ambitious policies. Greta Thunberg global protest pressured governments to commit to climate action, exemplifying how youth activism can influence international policy. Then we need to trace the role of youth in participation in government. We trace it back to the historical perspective, which is in the early 20th centuries, youth involvement was limited to student activism. In 1960s, counterculture movements marked a new era of youth-led social change. Today, digital platforms have revolutionized participation, enabling youth to mobilize globally. Then we also have the contemporary trends. Digital activism such as Friday for Future demonstrates youth capacity to influence climate policy. The UN strategy of 2018 emphasizes youth participation as a cornerstone for sustainable development. Then we have the global initiatives by the United Nations Youth Strategy of 2018 to 2021. Aims at amplify youth voices in policymaking. The African Union's Youth Commission promotes youth engagement in continental governance. Strategies to enhance youth inclusion in Kenya and globally. One is legal and policy frameworks, enacting laws that guarantee youth representation in Kenya's 2010 constitution. International agreements like the Africa Youth Charter of 2006 set standards for youth inclusion. Then we have institutional mechanisms like creating youth council and advisory bodies at national and local levels. Then we have embedding youth representatives in decision-making forums such as the local council. Number two, we have education and capacity building. Civic education programs in schools and communities. Number two, we have the leadership training initiatives like the Kenya Young Leaders Program. Then we have digital engagement, utilizing social media to facilitate dialogue, like what the agencies were doing. We have developing e-governance platforms for youth consultations. Then we also have the cultural and societal change, promoting intergenerational dialogue. to bridge gaps, then challenging stereotypes that youths are irresponsible or inexperienced. Then we have international collaborations, which aims at sharing best practices through international organizations and funding youth empowerment projects via programs like the EU Youth Initiatives. Then we have the specific recommendations, like for Kenya, for example, we have to strengthen enforcement of constitutional provisions on youth representation, be guided by this book, which is the Constitution. Then expand civic education to include digital literacy and governance. Then we need also to support youth entrepreneurship through grants and mentorship programs. We also need to create inclusive platforms for marginalized groups, especially the young women. We also need to monitor and evaluate youth participation initiatives regularly. Summarily, youth participation in governance is a cornerstone of vibrant, inclusive democracies, while challenges such as marginalization, socioeconomic barriers, and cultural norms persist. Significant progress has been made through reforms, activism, and international support. Kenya's constitutional reforms and youth movement exemplify the potential of youth engagement to influence policy and drive social change. Moving forward, both Kenya and the global community must prioritize legal frameworks, institutional mechanisms, civic education, and technological tools to empower youth. By doing so, societies can harness the creativity, energy, and innovation of young people, transforming them from marginalized groups into active agents of development and change. In an era marked by complex global challenges, youth inclusion is not just desirable, but is essential for building resilient, equitable, and sustainable societies. In a nutshell, countries or governments need to observe the role of youth being involved in governance across the world. I thank you.